Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. John Michael Salvato, and you're watching The Brew, a weekly show for queer LGBTQ pagans, witches, metaphysicians, basically anybody who comes to the path from any of the varied traditions that make up that crooked path, that pharaoh wisdom path. And today, normally we have a format where we interview some incredible folks, leaders in the community, movers and shakers, and folks from around the world, who are making a mark and sharing spirituality with us. Today is one of those days when I thought we would do something a little different, kind of experimental. Want to see what kind of feedback we get from the audience, and that is that we're just going to kind of make this an open discussion. So if you would like to be part of what we're doing, just leave a message. If you'd like to jump in the conversation and be on cam, leave a message, and we'll pull you up into the studio. And I'll tell you when that happens. You'll first be in the lobby section, and then we'll bring people in as we can. We can have a total of 4 people, I think, including myself, for the conversation. And today's conversation is about something that I think, and as we got closer to showtime, became more and more relevant, and that is the witch's power as a sovereign. Because I've seen people, and I'm sure all of you have too, people criticizing this person or that person because their path is supposedly wrong, or they're not doing this right, or they're not doing that right. And I'm not talking about legitimate coaching or helping one another to understand, what is necessary for new folks or young pagans, young witches. But I'm talking about coming from a perspective where we recognize that the witch's power is nothing more than the result of relentless self-inquiry, a willingness to see the messy side of who we are, to be willing to get our hands dirty a little bit. And it comes with a commitment that's bound to deeply personal, sometimes uncomfortable work. And it's not something that gets bestowed on us or given to us. From my perspective, it's not something that requires worship of any deity or any other entity, or participation necessarily in a coven, or initiation through various degrees. While all of those things are valid, all of those things are important for those whose tradition and whose path is a worshipful path. I mean no disrespect, but usually those folks who have such a devotion and a dedication, sort of a worshiping relationship with the deities, they're usually the ones, because of that relationship, who understand that it's not their place to criticize and attack. And we saw a conversation earlier today on another friend's Facebook page, where they were talking about one of the most incredible, probably among, I would say, the 5 most incredible influences in 21st century and 20th century witchcraft, and that's it's hard, disheartening to see people attacking someone because their tradition, and calling somebody's tradition fluff, or calling someone's tradition illegitimate because it's not dark enough, or whatever. That I just wanted to say, guys, we're in this together, and as a LGBTQ community, we're marginalized enough by society. We've struggled enough just with getting folks to understand and embrace who we are. Why are we doing this to ourselves? And recognizing that if I tell you that your path is illegitimate, that immediately illegitimizes my own. So today we want to talk about that, and we want to hear from you guys. If this is your first time seeing the broadcast, go ahead and drop a 1 in the comments below, and tell us where you're watching from. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, let us know. I've got my friend Scott with us today, and we're going to talk a little bit about the differences in just our traditions, our experiences, where we come from. For myself, as a Stregoneria practitioner for the past 50 years, who has broken with tradition somewhat. And he in a tradition that I absolutely love, with a group that call themselves the Misfits. And so let me go ahead and bring Scott into the group. If any of you other folks are interested in joining the conversation, just let me know and I'll get that link to you. I don't walk and chew gum very well at the same time, so it might take me a second here. Let's see. Hey, there you are, Scott.
All right. Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Hello, everybody.
You know, I wanted to, I appreciate you being here with us today. And because I think this opportunity once in a while to break from the interview format, although just before we came on the air, full disclosure, I did ask Scott if he and the crone from his organization, from his group, his coven, would like to be on the show, because I'd love to hear more about the work that they're doing. But, you know, just sort of in general today, you know, tell us a little bit about your tradition, and maybe we started to talk before the show a little bit about that sense of there's no wrong way to approach your spiritual path.
Correct. There is definitely no wrong way. And I think that's one of the things about our eclectic group, is that we do allow so much freedom with other religions. I mean, we have Buddhist and actually some Christian witches that actually come in, and you know, we have a very wide, as far as our larger part of the group, you know, it's a wide variety of different religions, and we want to learn from them and see how they do. So we open up a lot of times full moons for them to go through and show us how they do, you know, their traditional things. And on the higher holidays, we will show them how we actually perform, and things are known to be, you know, a certain way in that regards. Our openness really stems from the fact that, in the name of the Misfits, that so many groups become so cliquish, and like you were talking about, how, you know, they will, you know, well, that group over there, they're not real witches, or, you know, they're not, they don't know what they're practicing, blah blah blah. And we just found that, you know, even the smallest and lowest among us can teach us something from their spirituality. And opening ourselves up to that has done a lot. I mean, we went through a lot of transformations in the larger pagan community, and we're sort of ostracized in some ways, because we just basically don't really care what people think about us, regardless, you know. And we sort of stand in our own power. And that is the main thing that we like to teach people. We really like people to learn to stand in their own power. I think that's the biggest thing nowadays, because so many people abdicate their power to others, to the Pope, to whatever preacher, and you know, whomever, you know, coven leaders, the high priest, whomever, and don't recognize that they have that same power within themselves. And so we really do work hard with our members to help them blossom, so to speak, within their own time and their own way, and no rush. And we did initiations actually this past weekend for 2 of our members, and one of them didn't want to participate in a part that we just said, okay, no problem, later on if you want to, that's fine. And we don't make a big deal of things that, you know, if it makes somebody uneasy, we're not going to force anything upon them. We're not going to say you got to do this or you're just not going to be in. We're not going to do anything like that. We do have certain guidelines and things the way that we do it, but we're not going to push it upon anybody.
So your tradition is essentially a Stregoneria based path, right? Based on a lot of the writings of the late Raven Gramasi, and you guys were just up at Raven's memorial service, right?
Correct. And probably we might not even be in existence if it wasn't for some of the things that he brought out to, you know, teach us in a lot of ways. And so we really honor that. don't agree with everything, of course, but you have to admit, your teachers know who they are, and he was a very big part of how the Misfits actually came into existence. We don't really have a hierarchy, I guess, except for the basic, the high priest, the crone. I mean, we have these representations, but we never make that so that others don't feel empowered, I guess is the way I'm trying to put it. We really like for people to grow in their own power. So sometimes, people look at our high priest Raven and, he's just a big old giant man that, you just think some big old redneck, if you met him on the street and you look at him and you say, we try to greet each other as the humans that we are. And that's the biggest thing, is to recognize our own humanity, especially with the gay. I mean, we have a large part of our membership is, LBGT. And so that has a lot to do with, I guess, some of the segregating things that we have in other groups where they're not really keen on that part, maybe.
You answered the question I was just going to ask you. I want to get to one of the comments here. Chris, hello, how are you? It says here, I don't know if this will fit on the screen. Yes. So Chris says every path is legitimate, in my opinion, because if we one day realize it, they all can flow together. We are one and yet diverse, and that diversity is the basic building block of life. Flowing together with your own unique diversity, a spell can magnify immensely. And yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Chris. I appreciate you weighing in. And if you're watching with us out there today, now that I have my glasses on, I can actually see some of the folks that are there. Carrie, hi, and Matt, hello. Danny, Dominique, welcome. We're glad to have you guys here today, and we'd love to hear from you. So what we're talking about today is a witch's sovereign power. And what I think, what I feel, and I have to credit the matriarch in our family who instilled in me at the age of 5 as I started my training in traditional stregoneria, that if a witch doesn't own their power, and I think you might have seen Scott in a conversation on another board right before we came in, somebody saying, well, if I don't worship and invoke a certain god or goddess, then I have no power, my spells don't work. And I thought that was really unfortunate. And while I'm not going to tell somebody that their tradition is wrong, or that their understanding of their tradition is wrong, that's not my place. I really wish for folks that they could understand. I think that the way that I was taught to not worship any of the deities, but instead to embrace them and build a relationship with them. And that building of a relationship went so much further than just working with Diana and Dianos or Hecate. It influenced everything that I do. I don't work with herbs without developing a relationship with the plant. I don't work with a root without developing a relationship, cultivating a relationship, and relationships are give and take. And so that kind of informs my practice. Now, I know you told me before the show started that we can tell from your New York accent where you come from. And so growing up in the South, you said that your grandmother was a root worker, a conjurer, and an astrologer, right?
She was an astrologer, a root doctor type, and I am very lucky that I wish I had paid more attention than I did and really dug her brain out before she was gone. But my ability and desire to work with the devas of each species of plants came from her acknowledging very young, when I was a child, that this plant has a spirit, and you got to thank it for things, and you thank it before you cut it, and you do develop this relationship with it before you just snatch it out of the ground and use it. Or it's diminished. It's not that it doesn't work, it's just that it's diminished in its ability to really give you its full wholeness, I guess. So I was lucky in that respect. And one of the funny things on the astrological side, she did my chart when I was born and told my parents, and I don't know if it was because she knew that I was gay from birth or what. She said, he ain't wired like the rest of us. And so I always liked that quote from her astrology in my chart. But I was very fortunate in that regards, because even though she was still working within the framework of Christianity, she was outside of it enough to, know that, hey, this works. And she used what worked. And that was something that I always learned about when I started developing my magical abilities, was that if it works, use it. And I was also taught that you should be able to do magic naked in the desert with no tools, period. And if you're not, then you're really not tapping into what we're talking about, which is our own sovereignty, our ability to tap into our own power. So I was fortunate in that regards.
I really appreciate that. And are you familiar with any of the work of Chaz Brogan?
I'm not.
Well, I'll do a little. He's somebody I actually want to get on the show sometime soon. I just haven't reached out to him to see if we could schedule a time. But for folks who are interested in exploring root work and some of the sort of the hoodoo tradition of the Deep South, one of the most amazing books that I've just very recently gotten my hands on that really was really interesting to me, because living in South Central Pennsylvania, I am just a few miles away from the Appalachian Trail, and probably 6 miles away, and so I've gotten to know some of the Appalachian folk in the area, including some conjure doctors, hoodoo practitioners, grannies, and just amazing people. And it's awesome to me to realize that, here's a tradition that was, started in the mountains here and in the mountains in the South, and sort of the country tradition. And so much of it is identical in its teaching to what I grew up with in the Italian tradition. And so if that doesn't tell us that there is, truth, that there's wisdom there, and that there's an opportunity for us to build relationships, not just in our own tradition, but everywhere. This is the book. Let me see if I can get it on there. It's called The Secret Keys of Conjure by Chaz Bogan. And it's really phenomenal. I definitely would recommend it. I think you'll find some really great stuff in there, and an opportunity for all of us. I see Vanessa is getting ready to get on a plane from either, I think, to Miami. Have a safe trip, Vanessa. We'll look forward to hearing from you when you come back and getting you on the show as well. It just seems to me that if everything were homogenous, there wouldn't be the opportunities for me, for example, to find a living tradition in the United States, as Chaz talks about in his book, a living tradition of working at the crossroads in the United States. So the traditions that I was told were always told with the idea that they were grooming me from the age of 5 to be the high priest, and that one day all of this would be mine. I still have yet to figure out what the hell all of it was, but it was with the idea that I would one day maybe be back in Toscana, or in Geneva, or in Sicily. And so a lot of those teachings were wrapped in the idea of the crossroads there, the landscape there, everything in, the surroundings there, where the Grand Boschetto would meet every year. And being able to connect with a tradition like some of the ones that Chaz talks about in his book, or some of the folks who've taught me here in the Appalachians in Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, has given me an opportunity to really expand my practice. And so, I would hope that the folks that are watching this might just consider whether, what harm would come if you opened your arms and opened your eyes and your hearts to new wisdom, to wisdom right where you are, that might inform you, help you to deepen your own traditions practice, and maybe, as you said, help you to see something that even the baby witch coming into a coven, or the solitary practitioner who's trying to find their way, might say something that helps spark awareness for you. I've got a message here from Chris, and it says, what is it like communicating to spirits and deities? Is there typical telepathic communication? Maybe they sense you feelings or images. Maybe they affect reality within unique patterns. I've been really interested in people's experiences and love a certain level of understanding for the possible day I try it myself. And Chris, I'm going to go ahead and have you respond to that as well, Scott. For me personally, these relationships are palpable. They're tangible relationships, that at the risk of sounding like some of the fanboys and fangirls out there, who join groups to talk about their experiences. I hesitate to do that because they're deeply personal, but I can tell you that there are times that there is kind of a knowing, kind of a feeling of communication that might be walking down the street, that might be sitting reading a book, and the relationship I have with the particular deities I work the most closely with Diana and Dianos and Hecate and Kali. Those relationships are part of every moment of my day. It's not, magic isn't something I do at 3 o'clock in the morning only. It's something I do from the moment I wake up to the moment I wake up the next day. So that includes sleep. So we communicate in dreams. We communicate in person, physical presence. It was a little unsettling and kind of freaked my fiance out a little bit when some of the physical manifestations would take place in our home initially, because he comes from a Jehovah's Witness background. So I'm certain that they've never seen anything like that. But it also is something that is, it's just a sense, it's just a knowing. It's the same way that lovers communicate with one another. Sometimes they talk, sometimes you intuitively know something, and other times it's just a glance. It really and truly is, for me, a romance. It's a, that they are, I hesitate to say they complete me, because I'm complete and whole as I am, but they bring out the better me. And really, it's not so much a matter of worship as it is devotion, as it is a sense of just being so grateful for their presence in my lives, their assistance in my daily work. But be absolutely clear, the responsibility for that work is mine. The source of that power is mine. Somebody said, are they archetypes? Because I frequently talk about archetypes, or are they real? And archetypes can be real. And so for me, they are very real, but they are also archetypes, which means for me that our relationship is so close that they are a part of me, that they represent and resonate with a part of me. And I think that for all of us, my theory about this, based on my own personal experience and the teachings that I've received, is that the gods and goddesses that we work with, the demons that we work with, the angels we work with, any entities that we work with, are entities that resonate with some part of us. They are reflections of a part of us, and that's why that relationship, that affinity, is there. So, Chris, when you're ready, I would say to take yourself out into nature, barefoot if you can, so that you're fully grounded, and just allow the universe to speak to you. And there's nothing to be scared of. There's nothing to, this isn't Sabrina. You're not going to have, not as much as some fanboys and fangirls would like. You're not going to have this deep, dark monster come and chase you and ask you to sign a book and all this other stuff. It's a falling in love. That's the only way that I can put it. Almost a courtship that'll begin. And as that courtship, if that resonance is there, that courtship will get stronger. And at times, like any other relationship, that relationship may wane. And that's I think I'm getting ahead of myself, and I really want to hear what Scott has to say about that. But I think that, put this in perspective, that's the part that many people that are in the pagan movement, especially LGBTQ pagans, miss, because they came from the Abrahamic traditions, whether it's Christianity or Judaism or Islam, where they were persecuted, where they were attacked for being LGBTQ persons. And so the relationships that they struggled and strived so hard to have, a great way, I think, to heal that, having lost everything in the satanic panic of the 80s, personally, where I had death threats for more than a decade, and people just trying to destroy my name, and it was insane. But that relationship that I had with the archetype of the Christ, with the archetype of his mother, that relationship remains intact for me, because it was a relationship that was relational. It wasn't worshipful. And when the time came for me to move on, it was a moving on that was like a beautiful breakup. It was a moving on that was like, saying, you know what, over the years, we've become best friends, and I'll love you. You'll always be a part of my life. But this relationship is changing, and it's time for me now to move on. So while I wanted to smack just about every one of those attackers into the middle of next week, my relationship with the spiritual side of my past as a priest, as an archbishop, was a gentle transition. Mainly because my whole ministry was as a Stregon Mago, as a practitioner of Stregoneria, where we hid and couched everything under the veneer of Catholicism. And so the relationship I had with them was a magical relationship, and I could let it go. And so if you're coming from a Christian tradition or a Jewish or a Muslim tradition, really dig deep and kind of explore healing that relationship, so that it frees you from the baggage that might be standing in the way of that, of meeting that next person, of embracing that next spiritual relationship. Scott, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, so many thoughts went to my head when you were talking like that. I mean, just on that aspect right there, there's a great church here called Wedgwood Church in Charlotte that's real LGBT affirmative, and the first 4 people I met there were atheists. And so I came as like one of the pagans that, sort of visited. And I told the pastor there, I said, a lot of people don't understand. Jesus led me to my paganism, actually. I mean, when I was within Christianity as a child, and I was going through the whole thing of, the gayness and things that were, counter to quote unquote Christianity, I asked to be led to where I need to be, and I was led into nature each time. And when you were speaking on that aspect about going out barefoot and things like that, my shamanic training has always made me, no matter where I am, try to commune with the genus loci of a location. And I think that's very important for people that are just trying to figure things out. Is one of the first things I would recommend is, wherever you live, whether it's an apartment building, a condo, trailer, mansion or whatever, go sit on that land and acknowledge the genus loci of that land, that spirit of that land, and leave open for that communication, because just sometimes the acknowledgement is enough for that genus loci to say, oh hell, nobody's talked to me in millennia, and they like it. Not always, but a lot of them will just come forward immediately. So my work really does entail a lot of work with the genus loci of the land, meaning that the spirit of the land is the first thing that I am going to acknowledge and honor. And again, it's different because I'm not worshiping this genus loci. I'm actually honoring it as another spirit on the path to evolution to whatever, because I'm very Tibetan Buddhist Bon, I guess, in a lot of ways, where I do believe that our evolution of the souls, that we are going through all these things and we experience all these different, and we live in an age now where we can experience them instantaneously on the internet, and finding out these different traditions, how they go. I think it's wonderful that people, have this ability to tap into the knowledge. But aside from that, I'm like you. Take your shoes off, clothes off, preferably if you can. Go out in the wilderness, woods somewhere, and sit and just be still and listen, because that's when. Now, I do have to admit that I did use hallucinogens a number of times, and still am not adverse to it, as a lot of people are. And my experiences with that even took me even deeper into some other realms that really were about the devas. I mean, like when I first did that, it was very. Thank you, Chris. And not that it created that experience, because I was already developing my own experiences with these beings, but it did enhance my ability to communicate with them. So that's what I took from it, and I have always done those in a very ritualistic manner. I have done for fun before, but I don't like it as much as when I do it in a truly, ritualistic manner, where I'm trying to get what's on the inner to communicate to me. Because I do believe, when you were talking about archetypes, do you know what a tulpa is?
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of the word tulpa? I use the word tulpa in a way to describe a lot of the deities, because the energy that the worshipers give them, basically, in my mind, is a battery for the deity or spirit or whatever to keep alive, and it keeps them vibrant. Not saying that they disappear if there's nobody out there worshiping them. I just say that they're more vibrant when someone is actually trying to contact them or commune with them. So my thought on deities and communing with them is to listen, whether it's in dreams, where I've done, like in Greece, where you had like a nematon type situation, where you could go into a sanctuary, lay down with the snakes, and dream, and let the gods come and tell you what's your illness and things like that. Dream work is a big thing in mine, where I would hear things or get communications from things. Like years and years ago, I got communications from Nordic deities. And it wasn't until after I did my DNA and learned that I had no Native American shamanic stuff in it, but it was all Viking, and Celtic and some sparse Greek and Italian. But it was basically that message that, hey, homeboy, come here. And so I'm in a position now where I talk to them as friends, and it is more relationship oriented, as opposed to being, that I bow down to them. I guess I'm one, like, where I don't really believe so much in bowing down to subservience, but I do bow in respect. I think there's a difference. And when I'm out in the world, developing relationships, like with this church that I work with, I find that people and their experiences of God, they're so varied, and I'm really like, who was it? Krishnamurti, that went and did every religion so that he'd know what they were, and I'm all for that. I'm like, go out there and experience the gods and ask them if they want to come into your life, and the ones that do will. The ones that have came into my life, with power, are the ones, not always the ones I asked, but if I asked one, they might lead me to the one that really needed to talk to. And a lot of that came from a lot of my shamanic work, where, when we were doing things like your animal allies and things like that. And I learned very early in a very early age, because I had a fox one from when I was a child, that they change. You know, you may have this ally for a period of your life, and it may last for 3 weeks or 30 years or whatever, and you may have it with another one that, you know, is just a day or something. And I appreciate that. I don't find it a loss that I don't have the relationship that I used to have with certain deities now, because I feel like I've evolved enough to basically say, well, you know, my circle of you know, beings of light, or whatever you want to call them, is more on a term of equal. And I think a lot of that might come from some of my more far out extraterrestrial type ideas. I've had a number of multi-dimensional extraterrestrial experiences that have really shaped my life, and I think that, you know, that made me pause and say, well, where is my human place in all this? And I was told by one of my mentors, I'd asked her, I said, well, I feel like I need to go somewhere, that there's a battle out there for me to fight. And she said, you ever thought maybe the battle's right here and it's right there? And I took it to heart, and then she was right, because I ended up staying here in Charlotte, which, you know, I really didn't want to do. I wanted to live in France, Italy, or Greece or somewhere. And but I ended up staying here because I do believe that this genus loci, especially since I've worked this land that I live on now so much, is so palatable that I ask it to be renewed. I always, when I work at a place, I will actually claim the property for Mother Earth, especially if they are not, like most of mine are in veterinary hospitals, so it's sort of easy. I'm working with animals, but places that I've worked that really weren't oriented that way, I would still claim them back from Mother Earth, just to try to turn that energy, you know. So there's a lot of things that different deities help me do, and I don't rely on just one. And I guess that's the great thing about being polytheistic, you know, is that we don't have to rely on just one, and we recognize that there's this spectrum, just like we talk about with our sexuality. You know, there's this spectrum of deity, I guess, you know, and I've used a lot of the Kabbalistic thinking because it's just sort of an easy map to throw things on and say, well, you know, it's the forest type deities I'm dealing with, or, you know, it's the yes, the moon ones or whatever. And I find as I'm growing older now that the one that really is the most important to me is the genus loci, because that is where I am. That is my current environment. I am right here on this land right now. And so when I walk on my land, I feel the best, even though I'm in a suburban, you know, spot here in Charlotte. I've tried to make it an honor to the nature deities and elements and devas and things. And I remember when they tore down the whole place behind me and put up a whole new neighborhood, I was just crying. I mean, literally crying, you know, for the plants. And I went out and just walked the land and said, I don't know where y'all going to go, because these bulldozers are wiping everything clean. I said, I only got a half an acre, but come. And they did. And I let things go fallow in a lot of ways in my yard. I think you might have saw the picture of my circle, and it's grown up because I wanted all those devas and elementals to have a place. And so I asked them, I said, come if you want. And many of them did. A lot of them didn't. They disappeared. They were destroyed. And I really, that's what I'm saddened about, is our destruction of the spirit. Mankind has got to the point, and I have to go back to the Christian thing that says, don't be fearing the one that, you know, can take you to hell. Be fearing the one that can destroy your soul. And I feel like that's what's happening to Earth right now. As a gay pagan man, my duty now is to stand up for the right of the Earth. Even though in my soul I don't feel I'm even from here, I feel that, you know, my duty is to this place, Earth.
Yeah, it's your purpose. You know, I can't help but think of two things. One, while you were talking about inviting the elementals and the genus loci to your property before they lost everything to the construction, your birds were going crazy. So they weighed in, and I just want to thank and honor them for weighing in as well. And I couldn't help but think, as you were saying, you know, of walk barefoot and if possible skyclad. It just made me really kind of it just made me smile inside, because the conversation earlier today on my friend Matt's wall was talking about some of the people that were attacking Silver Raven Wolf, and we were talking about some of these and how misogynistic these attacks are. And another person who I think gets attacked unfairly, again, another one of those pioneers, is Sybil Leek. And Sybil, I had the great privilege of meeting her in the last years of her life.
Awesome.
We were in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and I met her and we had lunch together. And she said, and I said, I just have to. I was kind of scared to bring it up. And I said, I just have to ask you what your problem is with being skyclad. And so we talked about that. And she said, and in talking, she said, does it work for you? And I said, yes. And she said, then why does it matter what my problem is with it? And she said, this is your journey. And I said, well, good, because then my next question was going to be, what's your problem with substances, natural substances, shrooms and weed and salvia divinorum? And she expressed what her concerns were, and her concerns were really well founded. But all you hear people point out now is, oh, she was against substance use, and she was against being skyclad, and we it's easy for us to take a person out of their era, out of their specific time, their genus loci, and apply postmodern ethos to what they said and find fault with it. But if you looked at any single one of us, some of the things that I said and thought and did and practiced along my path were wrong as well. And that doesn't make me less of a person. It doesn't make her less of a person. And if you're watching this today and you've been attacked on social media, or you've been attacked in your local covens, or one person comes to mind who really seems like one of the most negative people that I've ever seen in the social media landscape. He joins every group to talk about how horrible gay men are and how bad his local area is and blah 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 blah. If that's what you're feeling, then maybe look at yourself and see what's being reflected. What is it about your journey that you need to forgive? What is it about your journey that you need to just let go of? Because your power is a sovereign power. Your power, the source of your power, is always and only in the present moment. You can't experience it by worshiping someone else. It's not going to be given to you by Ra or Amenhotep or Kali or Shiva or any other deity. Your power is your true nature. And our journey as witches, like I said, is a journey of relentless self-inquiry. It's a journey of getting your hands and your feet and your mind and everything dirty, getting the junk around you. Yeah, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I sort of would, because there's a lot of talk out, or at least there was local here for a long while, about people doing shadow work. And I'm very much for what is true shadow work. The real problem comes that most people don't want to know the truth. And so when you really start digging up these things about yourself, then when you start putting on these different armors to protect the ego. And I guess that's my Taoist Buddhist bent that makes me say, my attachment to my own ego is like my worst enemy. And
it's your only enemy.
Excuse me?
It's your only enemy.
It really is. And so, and I'm very glad that my group recently, we have went through some trials and tribulations that has really taught us that ego is the destroyer. And so, those aspects of Kali Ma, that come out when she destroys, it really is that she destroys ego most of the time. It's really not that she's destroying anything in a destructive, malicious manner. It's usually ego. If you read the Tibetan Book of the Dead ever, you will get to the good part that basically says, hey, in the end, they tell you that it's all right here. You are creating your gods, and so you have to acknowledge your own power, because that ability, especially if you get into the whole tulpa aspect of it, where you can actually create something magically that has its own life, Gregories and fetches and different aspects of what I call tulpa, and those things, when they do gain their own life, what a lot of people don't understand is you cannot destroy them. The only way to get rid of a tulpa is you have to reabsorb it. You cannot go out and create something that is your, magical slave in the spirit world, energy world, or whatever, and then when it gets a little bit too big for you to handle, you can't banish it and all that stuff. What has to happen is it has to be reabsorbed back into you, because you had that creator part. At least in my belief is the way that works. And it's worked, for me when I've dealt with those things. So I find that when people, want to start knocking others down and, all these ego things, that it's just so much easier to say. I read recently about the Inuit, families, how they teach their children not to be angry and hold these resentments and things. And most of the time, it's because they take the step over what we normally are all pissed off about and different things, mad, blah blah blah, and they just go to that next fault, the end step, which is, oh well, guess I got to go and glue this broke glass together I just broke. They skip that mad part, and that is ego. They're skipping ego when they do that. They're leaving ego in the ditch, basically, so that they can go ahead and get to the bounty of what you do next. And it really is about the power of now, where you talk about, magic. I was telling someone recently this very much same thing. I said, when you're dealing with magic, it's now. If you're trying to do something magical to change the past, that's not going to work. You've got to change the now to make any effect. And that effect from the now does reverberate to the past and the present. But if you're not doing it for the now aspect, you're going to lose out, because you're not really focused on that, which is what's happening right at this moment to your body, your spirit, your mind. And that's why I think that in my practice, the genus loci has been so important, because I always have to say, well, I might be in some slum lord's house somewhere that has all this evil go on in it, and the genus loci there is not too, nice. And so, the only way that you're going to do that is to communicate to them, is there a way that I can benefit you to heal? So sometimes you've got to heal these spirits have to be healed too. And we don't recognize, the gods even do. So, right. A lot of people don't recognize that the gods can be wounded, in ways that only we can fix them. And so that is part of our dynamic with the deities and the spirits, is that we are working in unison. They heal us sometimes, and sometimes we are healing them. And that's a big aspect for me that a lot of people forget.
Chris, I want to answer your question here, if I might, and then we have got to where I apologize to everybody that we're keeping you a little longer. This has just been such a great conversation that I realized we just went 5 minutes over. Chris says Kali is a mother, right? So she takes away what doesn't help you, and yeah, the mythos tells us that Kali went out and saw these demons, if you will, that couldn't be destroyed, and every time she would tear off their head where a drop of blood would fall, another demon would spring up. And so Kali then consumed it's sort of the primordial vampire story. She consumed every drop of blood of those demons so that they could not spring back up. And that's kind of really what our spiritual journey is all about. As Scott said, the tulpa is, energy. Energy doesn't get destroyed. It never gets created, nor is it destroyed. And so what the witch does is the witch works with energy. And so whatever you create with energy, if you wish to uncreate that, you have to absorb it back, because these are all reflections of us. And that includes our deities. That includes the devas. That includes every aspect of our lives. It's about taking back 100% responsibility. Chris, I want to thank you for spending time with us today. It was really wonderful. I hope to have you guys from the Misfits on a show in the future, and we'll talk about that. After the show sometime, or tomorrow, or since I'm running late, I've got company coming for dinner. I'm realizing I got to get out there and get to the farmer's market and get the veggies and all that before they're going to get here before I get back. But folks, those of you that are watching, I'm going to thank you as well. And our guest, as I said, Chris McKinney from the Misfits. As we do at the end of every show, I want to encourage you to stay in the moment, because that really is, as Chris said, and as I said, that's where the power is. And if you can return to the moment, it doesn't matter what happened to you in the past, and you can recognize that the future is just a construct. So if you want to change your future, change your present, right here, right now. Bring gratitude to that moment, because if you can bring gratitude to that moment, then that changes and transforms everything. And if you can't be happy with what you have right now, there's no reason to believe you're going to be happier with more. So take that to heart. Be grateful for what you've got, and always remember, as my teacher, the late Kennedy Schultz, would say, the best is yet to come. We'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Scott. No, I was talking to Chris, our other guest.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You bet. Take care.
All right. Y'all too. It's good.